speech today by Priti Patel. Huge round of interviews, actually, by Boris Johnson ahead of his all-important speech tomorrow. And just sort of get a temperature test, I'm going to talk to Sebastian Payne, the Financial Times Whitehall correspondent. Sebastian, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, Priti Patel's speech today. Now, I'm of an age when I can remember right-wing, conservative Home Secretaries. This was a little bit Back to the Future, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It's the first speech that you've heard at a Conservative Party conference that was really in the hang 'em and flog 'em tradition that the activists love to hear here. That, you know, she got up there and she really got them going. And she's saying that basically we need to have lots of tasers on the street. That she said she wants a massive increase for police officers to be able to tackle criminals on the street. And look, this sort of stuff is catnip. It's red meat for the Tory activists. They're obviously going to love this kind of stuff. It went down rather well. And, you know, I actually thought Sajid Javid's speech yesterday was probably the best main horse speech, but I imagine when Boris Johnson speaks tomorrow, he's probably going to blow them out of the water. The speech the Prime Minister is going to give, he's written entirely himself. It's going to be from the heart, and it's his debut in front of the party. And the thing that I've really felt from this conference is the Tories love Nigel Farage.
well, they love his policies, that's for sure. I mean, you mentioned Sajid Javid, Seb. I mean, I watched all of that speech yesterday, and whilst the content was interesting, the style of delivery reminded me of a solicitor reading out a will to the family. I mean, it was so dull, the jokes didn't work, he doesn't have the pizzazz, and Boris has pizzazz. But what does he say? Because what I'm beginning to pick up is that it's all well and good saying we're going to leave on the 31st of October. But do you feel there is a split emerging about what Brexit actually looks like?
I think there is a sense that at this conference, because when you go around the fringe events, which are dominated by Brexit and people like Steve Baker and Mark Francois, who probably are more on your side of the argument about this, they're expecting a whole new Brexit deal. They think it's not just going to be the backstop, it's not just going to be a rebranded version of Theresa May's withdrawal agreement. But that's probably what Boris Johnson is cooking up at the moment, that if we do get this deal emerging, we're hearing reports it could be in the next couple of days that the British government are going to put forward their proposals. It's going to look an awful lot like that deal Theresa May put before Parliament 3 times. And for those MPs, yes, they're talking the language of compromise. Yes, they're talking the language of trying to get this thing through. But I do wonder if they're just going to say, actually, you know what, Boris, we have been on your side, but this deal we simply can't accept that. So they're being friendly and they're being on his side, because don't forget all of the ERG and the 28 Spartans who never backed any Brexit deal. Those are the people who supported Boris Johnson for the leadership, and I think they're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah, and I'm sensing that from this end, from one or two Tory donors. I met one today, quite a big Tory donor, kind of really worried that Boris may be reheating Mrs May's deal. Now, the cat's away, the mice will play. I tell you the remarkable thing in London today, how incredibly quiet everything has been. And I wonder whether this is the calm before the storm. We've had a sort of press briefing from John McDonnell, but if the Remainers want to strike, you know, ahead of that summit, which, and let's face it, we're in October now, do you think there's a possibility, which I'm half sensing, that we might get some announcement tomorrow morning before midday to try and spoil Boris's speech about the attempt to bring forward a motion of no confidence?
Well, look, if you wanted to sink the Prime Minister's speech, that is the thing you would do at this point. But the argument the opposition parties have made is they don't trust Boris to follow the Benn Act. That's the legislation to avoid a no-deal Brexit that was passed by backbench MPs. So they think that that he's going to somehow dodge it, duck it, and maybe not follow the rule of law. So if they were to bring forward that confidence vote, it sort of feels like they've gone around their own idea, their own arguments here. So it might be great drama. But at that point, you know, yes, they might win that because the Tories would back them in that confidence vote. Then I'm just not quite sure how that plays politically for them, because you could have an election now. Boris could hold that election date after October the 31st. And of course, that means you could have a no-deal Brexit. So yes, they might think about it, but it, to me, doesn't quite make sense.
And they can't unify, can they? Because Joe Swinson won't back Jeremy Corbyn. Is there a compromise candidate that could get many of the 21 who lost the Tory whip to support, including Labour and the Lib Dems? Is anybody out there capable of doing this?
I think actually Margaret Beckett might be, to pick one of the names that's doing the rounds, because if you're Labour, it probably has to be a Labour MP because they're traditionally much more tribal and they don't trust the Conservatives. And, there's a lot of people who have been all over the place on Brexit, and to form this caretaker government that has been described, you would have to have someone in there who's been absolutely steadfast on a second referendum and trying to campaign for Remain. And Margaret Beckett is someone who could do that. Ken Clarke, of course, is talked about all the time, but I just wonder with Ken Clarke whether Labour MPs could really put another Tory in number 10, and also, for being quite frank about it, a Tory who is 79 as well.
Yes, no, he is, absolutely. Now, tonight on LBC, Sebastian Payne, I'm asking my audience what they think, whether in 30 days' time we'll leave with a deal, without a deal, or whether we won't leave at all and have an extension. And I'm going to ask you the toughest question I could ask anybody. What do you think is going to happen on the 31st of October?
I think, Nigel, you're going to be holding a rally saying Brexit has been delayed once more, and
delayed? I think I might say betrayed, might I?
You might copy some of the language from the government here. Look, I think the fact is we're going to see if this deal is about to emerge, and all the signs that we're picking up from both Brussels and from Westminster is that Boris Johnson is going to move a fair bit in terms of the proposals he's putting forward, but the level it's going to require Dublin to move is just too great, and they're not going to budge. That means this deal is not going to fly, and yes, he might try to evade the Ben Act, but at that point, I think you do get into confidence vote territory. The government probably does lose that, and before we know it, we'll have that delay, we'll have a general election, and the Tories will run, the Brexit Party will be running, and at that point, I'm not going to predict any further, but I do honestly think the most likely outcome now is another Brexit delay and then a general election.
I agree with you 100%. We don't always agree, but I agree with you on that 100%. And thank you so much, Sebastian Payne, for joining us this evening. Well, that's my view too. Let's listen to Boris Johnson talking to LBC's Nick Ferrari at breakfast this morning.
Well, I think the best way, Nick, that we can sort things out is obviously to get a deal. And that's what we're working very hard to achieve. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm cautiously optimistic, but there's a long way to go. And we're now getting to the really hard bit of the discussion.
Are you likely to die in a ditch?
Well, I hope not, and certainly not literally. I want to get it done, and where I think there's a way of doing it that can protect the peace process in Northern Ireland, that can protect the single market, that can deliver the results that we want. Also, getting the whole of the UK out, but it's a question of just getting everybody to agree.
The Financial Times says the country will know, or you and your team will know, pretty much where you are by the coming weekend. Is that accurate? And if so, why?
That's right, Nick. What we will be doing is
that means the cards will be delivered to Brussels after his speech tomorrow,
and we think it's a good proposal. And clearly, if there's no way of getting it over the line from their point of view, we'll have to live with that. But I think that they will see some merit in it, and we'll work on it.
And what are we to make if there are leaks from the other side? If they start to say, well, we don't like what Boris Johnson suggests about this or about that or about Northern Ireland, what are we to make of that?
Well, I think that we've just got to accept that as the stock in trade of negotiation. That's the kind of thing that happens. You obviously...
Do we do that to them then?
Well, no, we're not. I mean, we want to come out, and I think that to get to one of the headlines that you've just quoted, I think that probably they're also pretty fed up with this conversation, and they wouldn't mind if we quietly dispensed with the whole argument about Brexit.
Yes, you don't do anything quietly.
And allowed the UK and the EU to forge a new relationship, and that's the exciting thing.
And in a way my listeners can understand briefly, how have you solved the Irish issue?
Well, you'll forgive me, Nick, sacred though the precincts of your studio are, I'm not going to use this as the negotiating chamber.
Well, it's nice to hear Boris not being questioned about his personal life, I have to say. I don't think he sounds quite as convincing as he was a few weeks or months ago about the certitude of us leaving on the 31st of October. I don't think we are leaving on the 31st of October, but tell me, what do you think? Deal, no deal, leave, or extension? Sam is a new caller from Richmond. Good evening, Sam.
Hi, Nigel.
So, Boris is going to put his proposals to Brussels in the next few days, and the Irish government, many think, will just reject whatever he has to say.
Well, look, I signed a petition for the UK to leave the EU without a deal on October. The response I got is, and this is a quote, "We'd prefer to do so with a deal, but if there isn't movement from the EU on the backstop, we'll leave without one."
Do you believe them?
And I think it's clear. It's been clear for a while now. It's just going to be Mrs. May's deal with minus the backstop. Boris doesn't want to leave without a deal.
No, I agree
think
with that.
he's just kind of doing it to get a good bargaining position.
If he comes back, Sam, if he comes back and he's still Prime Minister, and he says to Parliament, right, it's this deal or no deal, the EU have vetoed any extension, and let's say he was able to get, and by the way, when we say deal, what we mean is new European treaty.
Pretty much, yeah.
If he got it through, would the public breathe a collective sigh of relief? Hurrah, we've got Brexit. Or would they say this is a total sellout? Which of the two, Sam? Where would you fall on that?
Well, look, I voted leave. I was a big fan of UKIP when you were in charge. Obviously, when you left, I just followed you to the Brexit party. But it's not gonna satisfy anyone. Brexiteers say it's not Brexit. Remainers just want Remain. That's very clear. No one's going to be happy with it, but it's what we're going to get. I think it's kind of a compromise. There is an argument that it was very close.
Not really. 1.4 million clear votes. Pretty big margin, really.
I don't know. Relatively, it was. I think it was quite close, and it's a very. I think even Peter Hitchens, he said he was very pro-leave. He said it was close. There should be kind of a compromise. If he's saying that, it's kind of changed my view as well, because I live in London and I'm literally the only person around here that seems to have voted leave.
But Sam, what is the acceptable compromise? I mean, do we just sort of give them some money? Or, I mean, because it seems to me, Sam, that if we stay tied to the single market, to the customs union, to the European Court of Justice, that's not a compromise. That simply isn't leaving.
Well, look, it's clear, Mr. May, she wasn't very good. I feel sorry for her, but she was offered something quite good in the beginning. She was offered a free trade deal, like a Canadian deal.
I know, Canada plus. Yeah.
If we had the right person at the time, she would have just taken that. The politicians at the time admitted defeat. They agreed to Article 50. It would have been done by now. It would have all been over. Then she just dragged it through the mud, and then the Remainers now have seen an opportunity.
I know. We're in a mess. Sam, 2-second answer. Are we leaving on the 31st of October?
Yes, on Mrs. May's deal.
OK, thank you very much indeed. This is the Nigel Farage Show. It's 17 minutes past 6, and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz.
The Home Secretary's told the Conservative Party conference they are now the party of law and order, also promising millions of pounds for police tasers and tackling drugs gangs. Heavy downpours and thunderstorms have swept across London, the south of England, Wales and the Midlands through the afternoon, with some areas...
Number 10 on the 31st of October. Well, he might be up before then, Linda. We'll see. Zena says at least May is no longer the worst PM ever. That's a bit unfair. He's not been there all that long. I think Pete in Wantage makes a very important point that's worth us thinking about. He says, I believe there's absolutely no way there'll be a deal while the EU believe there are MPs willing to thwart Brexit. Pete, you've put your finger on something important. Big story, front page of the Times today, saying Boris will get the extension vetoed by another European country or a group of them, and then go to the Commons and say, right, it's either this deal or no deal. I don't think at that summit on the 17th, 18th of October that there will be a veto to the UK extension, because they're still hoping that we have a second referendum and change our minds. They've done it before with Denmark. They've done it before with Ireland. They really don't want us to leave, and absolutely don't want us to leave, particularly with a clean break Brexit, because they fear we could become more successful. Let's go to John, who's a new caller from Huddersfield. Good evening, John.
Oh, hello there, Nigel.
Good evening. Welcome to the show. So, come on, it's sort of prediction time, and it's not it's not easy.
I've
but
nasty suspicion.
Go on.
There will be a reheat of the May deal.
Yep.
And I think it will go before the Commons. And for some strange reason, I could see them voting yes to it.
Now, would that be because Labour MPs in Yorkshire, who were terrified of the Brexit Party, would vote for it?
Yes, I mean, I've been anti-politics for a very long time. I'm a traditional Labour voter.
Yeah.
But I'm very much pro-Brexit. Leave means leave to me. I'm an ex-bank manager. It's just down to finance. If you're paying into something and you're not getting your money's worth out of it, I don't think it's worth it. That's why I go for that. But my worry is that I don't believe that Boris Johnson is 100% no deal.
Don't know why.
And I think the only way that this matter will get held to account and be sorted is by a general election and people voting with their hearts.
Yeah, well, John, I mean, there is going to be a general election at some point. But do you think, as I think, that the most likely... So you think it could pass? Do you think no deal's got a possibility or not?
If I was a betting man, that 10-1 chance.
Okay. And what are your odds on extension?
If the reheat doesn't go through, it will be the extension. That's what I feel. So I do agree with you on that.
Yeah. So it's nip and tuck whether the
I don't. That Parliament at the moment, there's that much going on in there. There's so much distrust even amongst the opposition. I've never known nothing like it, and I'm 50 years old.
John, if the reheat does go through, do you think there'll be a collective sigh of relief in the country? Hooray! Boris has got Brexit done.
No.
Or will people like you say, hang on, this isn't what I voted for?
I think it's going to make people very, very angry. Even those people that voted to remain will be wondering, just a minute, we've had all this debate, we've had 3 years of this, and all that we're seeing here is all this political shenanigans and the same thing that was on the table 3 times before.
Yeah. And they won't be happy, John, will they?
No, I mean, there will be a backlash vote, and you'll see a lot of seats that have been traditional Labour disappearing. Ones with big majorities. We talked about the North East, but I certainly think Yorkshire...
Well, John, I mean, look, the seat after seat in Yorkshire that's been Labour for decades, that voted Leave by big majorities, represented by Remain MPs. Unfinished business. John, thank you. Graham is a new caller from Hove in East Sussex. Good evening, Graham.
Hello, Nigel. Nice to talk to you.
Good to talk to you. Welcome to the show.
As an ardent Remainer and somebody that actually doesn't know anybody that voted to leave in terms of, like, my friends, family, people I work with, I don't know anybody that voted to leave at all. So I'm living the actual nightmare.
Parallel universe.
yes, indeed. And I do travel a lot, so it's not that I just live in my bubble. But
Graham, tell me, what do you do for a living?
Well, I work in the music industry.
Okay.
So I know that puts me in a slight pigeonhole. However, over the last few years, I'm now praying, even though I'm not a religious person, that we just that he comes back with Theresa May's deal with a slight fudge to the backstop, and we just get out. I just think it's the most sensible, pragmatic thing to do. I mean,
as an ardent Remainer, do you want that? Because you know we haven't really left.
Well, I could live with it.
I'm sure you could.
Because I could, because the reality is that I don't, I'm not, I like being European. I like, I trust the people in Europe. And I just think that this has just gotten so divisive. The idea that Boris Johnson would take us out with no deal, even if some of the horror stories are true, even if like 50% are true, I just think that the resentment and anger in the country would just never go. In the idea of sort of bringing back the country together, I think that, in any divorce, nobody really gets everything that they want. And I just think that it's the most sensible, pragmatic thing to do and just say, look, let's just put this behind us. I mean, what I would like to ask you, actually, if you don't mind, is that I know that you feel that the deal that Theresa May has brought to the table is worse than staying in. So
in many ways,
if you're in a position where you had two choices, either accept her deal or stay in, which would you choose?
Stay at home. Because it's not what I meant for. Graham, I want to make one point to you. There's a really, really important point, and that's this: that whenever I talk at public meetings, events around the country about Europe, not the European Union, but because they're two clean different things in my view, you will find that the vast majority of Leave voters actually rather love Europe. We love Europe. We love the idea of different countries, different cultures. We want trade with Europe. We want friendship with Europe. We want reciprocity with Europe. But we do believe the individual nation state is the right way forward. And we believe, Graham, that these glass and steel structures that have been built in Brussels, who've invented for themselves a flag, an anthem, and a set of unelected presidents, we just don't recognise that as Europe. Do you see that point?
I do see that point, yeah, but I just don't feel frightened of it. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I love being British, although it's not a great time to be British right now. It's not. I mean, I do understand what you're saying. However, I just don't feel as scared about it as possible. I still can feel extremely British whilst being in the European Union.
Not being governed by Mr. Juncker, Graham.
He seems like a really good bloke.
Well, I quite like him as a person, but that's not the point. Graham, I can love you and leave you. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:30 and time for the news with Lisa Aziz.
The Home Secretary's told Conservative delegates meeting in Manchester they are the party of law and order once again. Priti Patel's also reiterated her promise to recruit 20,000 new police officers and announced £30 million in funding to equip them with tasers and tackle county lines drug.
When asked about that, he has denied it. But when the Financial Times say we'll know by the end of the week where we stand, maybe they are right. We'll see. Before I get back to are we going to be leaving with Mrs May's reheated deal, with no deal or an extension? Remember last night, I played you some excerpts of an LBC undercover investigation in some woods outside of Dunkirk and the money that's involved in smuggling people across the English Channel. Well, of course, the other part of the gang isn't just in Dunkirk, it's in London and indeed in Birmingham. I'm going to play you another short clip tonight about how the money exchanges took place in Birmingham.
I'm here in Birmingham. I'm about to go to premises known as 4 Road Money Transfer Service. This is the address given to me by Farouk in Dunkirk in France. And he says that I've got to go and see a chap in there who will be expecting me, who will know what everything is about, and I've got to deposit £6,000. So you understand this is if the guy come here, he is going to put him on a boat maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow night.
Okay.
You give the money to him if he's arrived. He don't arrive, doesn't matter, hold it, because he will try again.
Okay, no problem.
So you know this...
I know him. Because he's sending money to Pakistan, so some guy is coming here, gets to a car money, and he send me the names.
Okay.
And give me the ID, so I send to Pakistan.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. And you will give me a receipt, everything? Yeah.
No
receipt.
Because it is not my responsibility or anything that I give you a receipt. Because this is not my money.
All right.
First clear with Wakar.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we are not taking any commission on anything. Yeah.
You should do if you're doing the service.
No, we don't want this headache.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Thanks very much. I will let you know.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks.
Well, that's the money side of it, and lbc.co.uk you can listen and see the film footage of this. And I mean, the whole thing is a complete racket. No wonder people are coming across the English Channel in the numbers that they are when the weather conditions are right, because as soon as they get to the British side of the median line, they're taken in by the UK authorities, they spend 24 hours in detention, and then they're taken to a hotel and no one gets sent back, or virtually no one gets sent back. And this problem is going to get worse and worse. And well done, LBC, for a really powerful, searing undercover report. Ian is a new caller from Manchester. Ian, are you enjoying the Conservatives being in town?
Well, I don't go anywhere near this while there's conferences going on.
Right, well, very sensible. So what's going to happen, Ian?
We're going to have an extension.
Are we? Why is that?
Well, no matter what deal, in my opinion, I've voted twice now to leave the EU. I voted in 75 and 16.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
So that tells you I'm getting on a bit. But I don't think that any deal Boris brings back, Labour, SNP and the Lib Dems, they will vote it down. And the EU won't veto an extension because they don't want us to leave.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Agree more.
They can't replace the $9 billion every year that we're currently paying.
Well, it's north of that, Ian, now, and going up fast.
Well, it can go up even more with this. When these four get hold of it, these fundamentals who want to build a European dynasty, it'll go up even more.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was in Strasbourg a few weeks ago, and Mr. Oettinger, who is a German commissioner in charge of the budget, said if the UK leaves without a deal, we have an immediate 11 billion black hole. So they've budgeted for us giving them the money. If we were to walk away without giving them the money, they'd be in a state of blind panic. All of which tells you, Ian, we could have negotiated all of this far better, couldn't we?
A lot better. If Theresa May had gone and said, right, we're leaving all the single market, the customs union, under the noses of the courts, common agricultural, common fisheries, and your $9 billion, you know, they can shove it, you're not getting it. I think...
Well,
I'm not, a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the general drift of the argument. I'm not sure the wording would have been perfect, but
I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. But no, look, we have made a complete and utter mess of this. Ian, thank you for your call. And Ian, you know, I mean, he's the most ardent of leavers, isn't he? You know, voted to leave in 1975 and in 2016, and he thinks we're going to have an extension. And folks, I think we're going to have an extension. I really think this idea that the EU will veto an extension so Boris can give this tough Hobson's choice to the House of Commons isn't going to happen, because the EU want to keep us in. The EU want us to have a second referendum. The EU want us to change our minds. And that, I think, is where we're going with this. Ashley is a new caller from Cardiff. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, speak to you.
Hello, welcome. So, what do you think? Which side of the divide, Ashley, are you?
I voted Brexit, I did, and I still stand by it.
Yes.
I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I feel the best way forward is a delay.
Yes.
Just because I've had family members who also voted to leave, but now have turned to remain. And the main issue they seem to be brought up with is the fear the politicians are sending. There's no one explaining why they're doing this fear and what they've actually put in place to counteract it.
Okay, so it's sort of Project Fear that's got them worried, yeah?
Yeah, but it's like, I want a general election, so hopefully the Brexit party can get into power, but you need to, like, campaign to say there's going to be traffic at Dover. Well, there's not going to be, because this is our plan to counteract it.
Well, Ashley, I mean, this is the remarkable thing. Point number one is that the President of the Port of Calais and Boulogne has said there'll be no extra delays.
Yeah,
Point number two, the boss of Dover has said, we're ready, there's no problem. And point number three, which is the most important point, is 85% of global trade takes place on WTO rules. And I could take you, Ashley, right now. I could take you right now to Southampton or Felixstowe, and we would see these most massive containers coming in from China. So why don't people believe that?
I feel like people just saying there won't be a problem isn't enough. There needs to be a full campaign on a variety of issues. Medicine for the NHS. I don't see why there's going to be a problem with it. But people need to be told a bit more in detail the actions being taken to make sure there's not going to be an issue.
Yeah, I guess it's difficult to fight back against negatives, isn't it?
I don't feel like your aspirations are to become PM. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well,
your main issue is you want to see Brexit.
Absolutely, of course. I've always wanted to see Brexit. I never wanted to be a party leader, actually, but I finished up half my adult life doing it. So it's all about what your motivations are. But
some people, I feel like, are worried about voting for the Brexit party as a parliament because you're a new party. etc., etc. What I feel like you need to run for is to get Brexit done, and then within a year of that, hold another general election so people can vote for you, knowing you're not going to be in power.
I tell you what, Ashley, if we get a clean Brexit, I think politics will be reinvigorated in this country. Ashley, thank you for your call. Anyone disagrees with Ashley strongly, it's 0345 6060 973. Hi, Nigel. I think Boris will leave on the 31st of October with a managed deal, says Bidge in London. Well, he has to get it through the House of Commons, and that is the problem. I think Boris is going to bottle it and we stay, says Andy in Portsmouth. Well, he won't sell it as stay. He'll sell it as an extension that he didn't want, but Parliament blocked him at every turn. That is what he'll say. That's if there's not been a coup to remove him from power. And I still think there is a real chance that somehow those opposition Remainer parties will bury their differences and find someone they can unite around. And I think those conversations have been happening today in London. Whether they're conclusive, we'll see. But I've got to tell you, there was an eerie silence in Westminster. Almost you could feel the pressure dropping before something big comes along. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It is 6:45 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. And to breaking news from Bloomberg, now being reported by the Telegraph and others, that European Union governments have discussed giving the UK a major concession on Brexit by possibly, and that's the word, time limiting the contentious backstop mechanism for the Irish border. Well, I'm guessing this is in response to the DUP. Their leader, Arlene Foster, yesterday said they could possibly accept the backstop if it was time limited. Question is, what is time limited? Is it 5 years, 10 years, 50 years? I mean, that all remains to be seen. And many of us, who favoured Brexit for a long, long time, would say even if you completely tip X out the backstop, the rest of this new European Union treaty is awful and still leaves us trapped. But maybe that's a hint. I've said for weeks, I think there will be some concessions from Brussels, but I do not believe they're going to be enough to get this through the House of Commons. That is my view. I think we're headed for extension, but I'm asking you what you think. John is a new caller from Leicester. Good evening, John.
Oh, hello, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Welcome.
I love your comical approach to politics and your nice suits.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm a comical. Well, I try and have a smile, John. I tell you what, because actually, if you don't, it all becomes a bit dull.
It does. It's a dull world.
So come on, you've got the crystal ball, John, in front of you. You tell me what's going to happen in 30 days' time.
Well, I don't think this country will leave automatically, just sign off. I don't think it can. But I did vote for Brexit.
Yes.
And I come from Ireland, and I'm very concerned about the state of affairs there. Mm-hmm. And I don't want a border across the country. I think it's already got a border around it, very strict border. So why do European and the Tory party just want to cause more trouble?
But I don't think, John, I don't think there is, honestly, I don't think there is any prospect of a so-called hard border or a wall between Northern Ireland and the Republic. I do not see that as even being anywhere possible.
Right, well, that's good to know.
No, I genuinely don't. And already, John, we have, between the Republic and the North, we've got different income tax rates, excise duties, corporation tax, different currency. So there are big differences already. I honestly think this has been used to try and kind of scare us, really. And Brussels have used this as a lever against us. But how do you see Boris as Prime Minister? Do you think he's strong enough to deliver this?
Yes, I do. He looks a bit of a clown with his image, but he's a brave man to take on what he has, to do it on his own and whatever. Yes, he is.
Do you know what?
Don't forget that the majority of this country voted in the referendum.
Yes.
To leave.
Yes.
So he must honour their request. Yes, definitely.
And at least he looks like he's trying. Theresa May, to me, never quite looked like she was trying.
No, I thought she was trying to make friends and compromises, definitely.
And you can't always do that. John, thank you for your thoughts. Off to the delightful Leon C to speak to Kim, who's a new caller. Good evening, Kim.
Hi, Nigel. It's the first time call, so I'm quite nervous.
Welcome. Well, just imagine we're in the Peterboat, one of your local pubs in Leigh-on-Sea, which I know very. I know all the pubs in Leigh-on-Sea, actually, and we're having a chat.
Hi.
Kim, is Boris going to deliver? Are we leaving? Are we extending? What do you think?
I actually think, and I mean, I listen to you, and I've actually become a news buff. All I do is sit and watch the House of Commons and Sky News. But what I actually think will happen is that we won't leave, not for the want of him trying. I think that you're quite right that this week Labour and the Lib Dems and the SNP will try and force a vote of no confidence. Where I think they might get scuppered is, which no one seems to be thinking about, is Her Majesty the Queen. Because I think they'll try and send someone to her to say that they've got the majority and they want to take over the governing party. And I actually think good old Elizabeth's going to turn around and say no. I think you should go back and have a general election and let the people decide, because it's the people's vote and democracy has to be upheld. They cannot overturn such a huge vote that was held, back in 2016 with their stupid political games.
You do raise a very interesting point, Kim, and it's this: that the thought that midway through a parliament, without a general election, not just the person in number 10, but the political colour of the person in number 10 can change. We've never seen it before, and it would be very interesting. But wouldn't it be awful to force our 93-year-old Queen, who's done, after 67 years of unblemished service, wouldn't that be a terrible dilemma to place her in?
It would be absolutely awful, but unfortunately, these people don't seem to have any morals amongst them. You've got Anna Soubry on the news today being interviewed and saying that
don't start me on her.
John Bercow and the colluding. And,
Anna Soubry leads a party that's hovering at 0% in the polls. She's all over the BBC as the nation's agony aunt. I can't bear it, Kim.
And you know what, Nigel? It just is so frustrating because, whatever way you voted, I'm a great believer in democracy. I actually voted to leave, and rightly, wrongly, they were my particular views of why I think I want our country to be sovereign. But
Kim, Anna Soubry and John Bercow and the others, they need to work together, because you didn't know what you voted for, Kim. You're not intelligent enough.
You know what, Nigel?
You are a knuckle-dragger, Kim, aren't you? You're an extremist.
And do you know what? It makes me frightened to say how I voted, because people make you feel like you voted because you're some sort of racist or you've got terrible views. My views are purely that I want this country to be sovereign. I want us to be independent, and I don't want bureaucrats in Europe, like they have done for the last 40 years, telling us how we should run our country.
But Kim, these all went to Oxford University. Do you not think they might be better than you and cleverer than you?
Listen, I'm hoping my son...
I'm only teasing you. I'm teasing you terribly. Kim, I wish you were in charge. I wish you were in charge with a good dose of Essex common sense. And thank you. Thank you for your call. You've been an absolute delight. I've got time for one more on this. Matt is a new caller from Alsace. What's the name of your town, Matt?
It's Alsace, Cheshire.
Right, I couldn't pronounce that to save my life. I should have just said Cheshire. So, Matt, I've got 45 seconds to tell the nation what's going to happen.
Well, I think there will be an extension, and I think there will be a deal, because it's in the EU's interest to have a deal in place, because they stand to lose a lot more than ourselves. What would be refreshing, though, is to actually see a politician with a thought process. Obviously, when the electorate has been dealt with in a fashion that we aren't sensible enough to make our own choices, the irony is to try hold a negotiation with the EU, effectively holding the poker hand with the cards facing the opposition. With people like Corbyn as well. You know what I mean? To go into a negotiation showing a hand straight away undermines the very principle of a negotiation.
Or even if we hid the hand, we've got people in our own parliament holding up a mirror behind us so the other side can see. It's been a disgrace, Matt. It's been a disgrace, hasn't it, the whole thing?
I think, to be honest, the sad thing is for a referendum where there's never been a higher turnout of voters, really the opportunity to dispel the cynicism and an apathy of voters has been chanced upon
I tell you
by
what,
politicians.
I tell you what, Matt, there'll be a general election. Don't get mad. You may have a chance very soon to get even. I'll be back tomorrow at 6. At 10 tonight, it's Tom Swarbrick. But live from the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, it's Ian Dale.
Nigel, thank you very much. Well, in the last hour, it's being reported that EU member states are planning to tell the European Commission it should consider time limiting the Irish backstop. On the eve of the Prime Minister's speech to the Tory conference here in Manchester, this might be considered a breakthrough if it's true.